What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. Like many people, I'm pretty fired up to check out Thor Love and Thunder later this week. I thought that director Taika Waititi absolutely nailed it with Thor Ragnarok back in 2017, so hopefully, fingers crossed, lightning can strike twice in the same place. And I thought now would be an ideal opportunity to take a look back at Taika Waititi's career overall, because of all the major directors out there who are working for the big studios like Disney, he's easily one of the most exciting, and he's come such a long way in such a short period of time, from his earliest days making super low-budget short films in New Zealand to basically now being one of the biggest A-list directors out there, someone who will get considered for things like a live-action remake of Akira or the next big feature film set in the Star Wars universe. For people who don't know, he's been tapped to direct the first feature film since Rise of Skywalker. And my understanding is that the screenplay is not even written yet, so who knows? That project may never come to be. From a personal taste, I would rather see him create a new universe from scratch. I feel like he's got the creativity and the clout at this point to carve his own path. But if there's anybody out there who could make me interested in Star Wars movies again, it would probably be Taika Waititi. Because from my point of view, in recent years, the Disney Plus app has played a large role in running a lot of the major franchises at Disney right into the ground. I feel like Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars are all reaching the point now where they feel very diluted because they got to feed the beast. I mean, if you have a streaming platform, it constantly needs new content. And as a result, all these brands now, they make too many shows and movies, and oftentimes with second-rate, lackluster filmmakers. But Taika Waititi might be the last director still over at Disney who I get really fired up about. Ordinarily, I would include James Gunn, but I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is probably going to be his last Disney project. It seems like he's very happy over at Warner Brothers doing things like Peacemaker and wants to do more. And what makes Taika so fresh and so original is how his movies are kind of hard to define in terms of genre. He always describes his movies as comedies with long bits where there are no laughs, or dramas that are too funny. And that's obviously his self-deprecating way of describing his style. But even his early indie New Zealand flicks, while they're kind of labeled as comedies, there's a lot of melancholy and a lot of sadness and a lot of heart and a lot of depth. And I like how his movies are kind of hard to pin down, but goddamn, he can also be one of the funniest motherfuckers alive, whether you're talking about in front of the camera or behind. And this video is going to focus primarily on his work as a director, but I have to say that anytime he pops up in something like The Suicide Squad as Ratcatcher 2's father, the original Ratcatcher, I always love these little cameos, and I feel like no one's ever going to say, oh man, that movie was great, but Taika Waititi made it worse. No, Taika Waititi almost always, as an actor, makes movies better or makes shows better. So it's going to be impossible not to mention his amazing roles like Korg in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I feel like when it comes to the industry at large right now, Taika Waititi is really going strong. But what I love is how he doesn't feel like he's gone completely Hollywood. I was watching this amazing Video Club interview recently where he visits this incredible DVD rental store, and he just walks us through some of his favorite movies and influences. And he's clearly just a massive cinephile. And whether you're talking from the earliest days of comedians like Charlie Chaplin or directors like Ernst Lubitsch, or people from the 70s like Monty Python or Terry Gilliam or Mel Brooks, he knows his stuff, and it's just so refreshing to see somebody giving a shout out to films by Hal Ashby or Mike Nichols or Martin Scorsese, Peter Bogdanovich, Terrence Malick, or a lot of his contemporaries like Park Chan-wook or Bong Joon-ho, or the Safdie brothers or Paul Thomas Anderson or Wes Anderson. He is just a movie freak, and I'll leave a link in the description below in case anybody wants to watch him. It's basically 15 minutes of pure cinephilia, and it gets my highest possible recommendation. And he makes a joke in the video about how he likes stealing from really old movies because it's tougher to catch. Anyway, I always love how self-deprecating and self-effacing he is when it comes to his own career. But I think at this point, he's got nearly a 20-year body of work as a director. That's one of the more impressive bodies of work out there of any director who is active. So let's wind the clock all the way back to the very beginning, to when he first started getting noticed by the world at large. He made a lot of early short films, but the big one that kind of changed his whole life was Two Cars, One Night from 2003. He got nominated for an Oscar, and you can see the DNA in this short film for his later feature films, Boy, Hunt for the Wilderpeople, and Jojo Rabbit. and it's an incredibly personal movie. It basically captures the experience he had as a little kid growing up in New Zealand, and it's an experience that a lot of little kids shared, where you have alcoholic parents who, when they're sitting in the pub, basically the kids are stuck in the car, and so the short captures all the delightful little conversations that they have while their parents are getting totally shit-faced. And speaking of his parents, Taika Waititi has a lot of love for his parents, but he admits that they had certain shortcomings, but sometimes you'll see him credited in his movies as Taika Cohen. That is his mother's last name, who was a school teacher who always encouraged him to read and write as a young man. And Waititi is his father's last name, who his mother met while he was in jail, but he was an artist and kind of a criminal. He basically says he grew up between two universes, but he has a lot of love for both parents, and he pulls from both worlds. And you can see ingredients from both worlds always at play in his movies, in particular, Two Cars, One Night. But in 2005, he made one of the smartest decisions of his professional life when he teamed up with Jermaine Clement to do the early short film, not the feature film, but the early short film of What We Do in the Shadows, Interviews with Some Vampires. And it's really down and dirty, and it's super low budget. It's only 27 minutes long, and it's a warm-up for the later feature film, which was obviously a warm-up for the later beloved television show. And a common complaint that I have is a lack of new, interesting concepts or creations in the world of film and television, where here you go. This is a fresh, original idea where they basically took their love of several vampire characters from several vampire movies and just made a kind of docudrama about their ongoing daily existence. And while the short film is not as polished as the later feature film and TV show, worlds turn on these moments where you come up with a really cool, interesting idea. And there's this great line that Taika Waititi quotes, which he attributes to Jermaine Clement when they're making the feature film, and how they're shot like 150 hours of footage, and there were times where Taika was like, "What are we doing? Are we going down the wrong path? Like, who's going to care about this?" And Taika was really worried about how wise of an idea it might be fleshing out this little short into a feature film. And Jermaine apparently told him, "Look, the world needs stupid shit." And that was the only advice that he needed to hear to kind of maintain his faith and vision in the concept. And here we are in 2022 with the 4th season of the show on its way. I think it's one of the funniest shows in the world right now. In any event, these two early short films, Two Cars, One Night and What We Do in the Shadows, I think that's the catalyst for a lot of his future work. And so much of his later work is capitalizing upon the ideas that were presented in these two early short films. But now we come to his first feature film, Eagle vs. Shark from 2007. Once again, he teamed up with Jermaine. And goddamn, this is a funny movie, but it's not necessarily like slapsticky broad comedy from start to finish. Like all of his films, it has its sad moments, it has its serious moments, it has moments of unexpected heart and depth. But goddamn, teaming up Lauren Taylor with Jermaine Clement is just pure comedy gold. They have the strangest, just deadpan, I guess, romantic tension that you've ever seen, where I think this movie in a lot of ways is like a distant cousin to debut feature films like Bottle Rocket by Wes Anderson, where it's got a really specific look and a really specific flavor of humor that I had never seen in any other movies. And I love it when a brand new original voice emerges where they've got their own style of storytelling, their own style of humor. And you can tell it's probably the style of humor that a circle of friends has been using for years, but now they're finally sharing it with the outside world. And when it came to describing the film, Taika Waititi said, "On one hand, Eagle vs. Shark is a slightly dark art film with some funny moments and a little bit of love in it. On the other, it's a romantic comedy with a soul and no stars attached." As always, he loves to kind of shit on his own work. I think that's kind of almost like a defensive mechanism so that he doesn't ever appear as if he's putting on airs or becoming too arrogant. But at this point, he's probably earned the right to be a little arrogant about his work. But I should also give a shout out to actress Rachel House, who appears in this. And Rachel has rapidly become part of his go-to stock company that he uses again and again. And I always love seeing filmmakers who keep their friends and relatives close by and use them frequently. James Gunn does that quite a bit, but obviously Rachel House, she appears in Eagle vs. Shark. She's great in Boy. She's incredible in Hunt for the Wilderpeople, and she even pops up in Thor Ragnarok. And she's definitely a huge component of the overall Taika Waititi flavor when it comes to his movies. And it's around this time that this circle of friends starts becoming much bigger and much more popular with the outside world, because this is right around the time where Jermaine gets the opportunity to do Flight of the Conchords with HBO. And obviously, they had already been doing it as as a comedy duo for years, but as a result of the success of the show, Taika Waititi was brought in and he directed 4 episodes of Flight of the Conchords. It was a great opportunity for him to get some experience directing for a major platform like HBO, which plays a role in getting him prepared for what might be the most personal movie of his career. And it's a movie that Taika Waititi has described as his own personal favorite of anything he's ever done, and that is the 2010 film Boy. Now, Boy is not a recreation of his own childhood, but it is heavily inspired by his childhood. It's filmed in the town where Taika Waititi grew up. It's filmed in the house where he grew up and the school that he went to as a young boy, and it takes place in 1984. I mean, there are a lot of great coming-of-age movies that have been made over the years, movies like The 400 Blows in France by Francois Truffaut. That's probably one of the best examples, but Boy, it's an incredible movie, and it's got so many laughs, it's got so much heart, it's got so much sadness. And for many years, it was the highest grossing film in New Zealand that had been shot in New Zealand. So I feel like Boy is a major turning point in his career where people realize not only is Taika Waititi wildly creative, but he can also generate big box office. And in the end, it all boils down to the casting, and it could have gone horribly wrong. The original kid who was cast to be the lead, 3 days before they started filming the movie, they bailed on him and they brought in James Rolliston, who was basically just an extra on the set. And Taika has some interesting comments about how when it comes to directing children, they're just excited to say any line, whatever the line is. And so there's none of that like, what is my motivation? None of that like that actor bullshit that you have to deal with. They have no, I guess, preconceived notions about what the craft of acting is. They don't put on airs. They just read the lines, and the movie's just absolutely delightful, especially getting to see Taika Waititi playing a figure who's loosely based on his dad and all the various lies that his son tells about him. And it's cool seeing how many influences Taika Waititi sprinkles into the movie, whether that's his love of the novel Shogun by James Clavell or his blatant love of Michael Jackson. I mean, the closing credit sequence, which is basically a haka dance inspired by Thriller, but with Maori music. It's just absolutely delightful to watch. At any rate, if all you know about Taika Waititi is the work that he's done for like Marvel and Disney, definitely go back and check out Boy. But here's the point where he starts getting a lot of success as a producer of television. He's got 2 shows where I've never seen any episode, but Super City, where he directed 6 episodes, and The In-Betweeners, where he directs 5 episodes. This is the point where clearly he's starting to work a hell of a lot. He's much more in demand. He's starting to get a lot of practice. But David Lynch has talked about this, about how directors oftentimes are too idle in between projects. And so you need to direct episodes of TV. You need to do commercials. You need to do music videos. It's a way of staying busy. It's a way of learning new technology. It's a way of upping your game. Writers need to write. Musicians need to compose and perform, and directors need to direct. And so right around this time is when he starts getting prepared for the movie that first put him on my radar. I didn't know him by name. I'd seen him in things like Green Lantern, but I didn't know who Taika Waititi was until the feature film of What We Do in the Shadows in 2014. And the way that it came to my attention, the movie hadn't done all that well back in New Zealand. And so its distribution in the United States was canceled. And so the filmmakers got together and said, well, hell, let's do a Kickstarter campaign to basically raise the funds to give the film a proper release in the United States. And I was one of the backers. I saw the video they made for the campaign, thought it looked hysterical. Can't remember how much I put in, but I'm sure it was something like $5 or $10. But I was one of the backers. I'm proud to be one of the backers of that flick. And the rest is history. It became one of the most pirated movies of that year, which is a strange claim to fame, but that's part of the reason why we now have the TV show that everybody knows and loves. And the way it came to be is so interesting. Taika says that he and Jermaine used to get together for coffee in New York, where they would sit there for hours saying nothing and maybe come up with like one line of dialogue. But eventually they wrote 150 pages of script, which they chose not to share with the cast and crew. They basically wanted to have like a loose outline for every scene, and they pre-lit the entire building so that the crew and the actors could go wherever they wanted and just keep filming. And it made the whole movie feel much more spontaneous. But I just love how this is like a true love song to vampires of the past and how they each kind of chose a famous vampire from different movies to base their characters on, whether that's Vladislav being loosely based on Gary Oldman's Dracula from the Coppola film or whatever the case might be. I guess at this point, this movie has been eclipsed by the success of the show, but no matter how much you might love the show, the movie is still well worth a look. And looking at his career as a whole, it's interesting seeing how every few years there's a show or a movie which represents a big bump in his ambition and his evolution as a filmmaker. And I feel like Hunt for the Wilderpeople in 2016 is yet another major turning point in his career. I would argue that Hunt for the Wilderpeople is stronger than Boy, but if Taika Waititi thinks that Boy is the more personal film, I'm not going to argue with them. But this is based on a book by Barry Crump. The original script was much more bleak, much more depressing, particularly the ending. But this was the movie where, as a consumer of movies, I was like, holy shit, Taika Waititi is really good. I mean, What We Do in the Shadows had made me aware of him, but Hunt for the Wilderpeople, I was floored by it. I laughed so goddamn hard watching this movie. Sam Neill is just absolutely sublime. And when it comes to casting, the whole movie would have fallen to pieces if they hadn't found the right kid to play the main part. But Julian Dennison as Ricky Baker, Jesus Christ, it's like you could spend years looking for the right actor for a movie like this and never find him. But somehow they just struck comedy gold, found this delightful kid who just nailed it. But the cast across the board is phenomenal. Whether you're talking about old school people like Rhys Darby, who's one of Taika Waititi's oldest friends and collaborators. But I feel like of all of his movies, when it comes to representing that perfect blend of heartfelt emotion and comedy and adventure and violence, Hunt for the Wilderpeople might be my favorite movie that he's made. But I guess it all depends upon how I react to Thor Love and Thunder when I see it later this week. And now we come to the most obvious part of Taika Waititi's resume review, and that's his career from the time he accepts a gig working for Disney on Thor Ragnarok moving forward. And obviously now at this point he is one of the world's big A-list directors. But I love how to get the gig for Thor Ragnarok, this is obviously work for hire. He didn't come up with these characters. He put together this highlight reel of different scenes from movies like Big Trouble in Little China, and then he put it all to Immigrant Song. And what's hysterical is that when he played this highlight reel to Disney to kind of give them an idea of what the flavor of the movie would be, he says a lot of the executives were like, oh, this is such a good song. What is this song? It blows my mind just how little sometimes execs in the entertainment industry will know about bands like Led Zeppelin or whatever the case might be. But the character of Jack Burton in Big Trouble in Little China had a massive influence over how the character of Thor was changed in this movie, because Taika Waititi recognized that Chris Hemsworth can be funny as fucking shit when you give him a little room to do so. And of all the movies that have been made by Marvel since 2008, I think Thor Ragnarok, it's up there with Captain America Civil War. It's up there with any of the great Marvel movies you care to mention. You know, Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it's probably easily top 3 or 4. I love the music. I love the relationship between Hulk and Thor. I love the relationship between Loki and Thor. I love the portrayal of Asgard and Hela. And just, it was this crazy mix of like old school mythology, but very modern humor. And yeah, it's a home run event movie, a home run popcorn movie. And I can only hope that Thor Love and Thunder compares favorably. And you could kind of tell that the movie was going to be amazing even beforehand when Taika Waititi did a little short film to show what Thor and Hulk had been up to during Captain America Civil War. It's just pure comedy gold and has all these great little bits with like Thor preparing all this disgusting food in his home and showing off the little bed that he has for Mjolnir. At any rate, that Team Thor short from 2016 was so goddamn good. And so at this point, obviously after Thor Ragnarok, Taika Waititi's career and life will never be the same. He's a very successful giant filmmaker, and I loved how instead of continuing to do franchise movies, he took a step back and decided to do a small film, a kind of borderline controversial film, but a movie which I really enjoyed, Jojo Rabbit, where Taika Waititi decided to play Hitler, and goddamn, he is funny as fucking shit.
Hi, Adolf.
What's wrong, little man?
They call me a scared rabbit.
Let them say whatever they want. People used to say a lot of nasty things about me. Oh, this guy's a lunatic. Oh, look at that psycho. He's gonna get us all killed.
This is where you can see his love of old school comedians and old school directors who have made fun of the Nazis in the past, whether you're talking about Charlie Chaplin with The Great Dictator or Mel Brooks and The Producers. We live in a time where everybody's saying like, oh, there's certain topics that can't be made fun of. And I think Taika Waititi very wisely recognized now is the best time to make fun of particular topics. And so I thought Jojo Rabbit was absolutely fantastic. Was it on the level of Hunt for the Wilderpeople? Not in my opinion. But I think it shows a lot about his goals as a filmmaker that right when he'd made a giant hit movie, instead of going bigger and kind of potentially dumber, instead he went smaller. He leaned into risk. He leaned into a more sophisticated style of storytelling. And I hope that he'll continue to follow that pattern throughout the rest of his career, doing a giant movie for the studios and then a small movie for him. And right around the same time as Jojo Rabbit, we see the TV show launching for What We Do in the Shadows. He's one of the co-creators, and he's directed 3 episodes so far, but it's more Jermaine's baby at this point, but Taika just pops in here and there to direct the occasional episode. And he'll pop in and do things like an episode for The Mandalorian, which is how he got kind of sucked into the Star Wars universe. Who knows if he'll end up making a movie for Star Wars. I hope it'll be good. I hope it breaks new ground, but I'm really rooting for him to make a giant new franchise from scratch, whether that deals with sci-fi or fantasy or superheroes or vampires or whatever the case might be, or even pirates like the show Our Flag Means Death from 2022. He directed an episode for that. And now we come to 2022 where he's got 2 movies, Thor Love and Thunder, as well as Next Goal Wins. Next Goal Wins, I don't know a lot about it. It's based on a 2014 documentary, and it stars Michael Fassbender. But I've seen the trailer for the documentary, and it's about all the various characters involved in one of the worst soccer teams on the planet and what happens when they bring in a coach who tries to tighten up their game. It looks as if Taika is sticking to the pattern that I mentioned, where he did Thor Ragnarok, and then he did Jojo Rabbit. And now he did Thor Love and Thunder, and then he's doing Next Goal Wins. Seems like after Next Goal Wins, it'll probably be something like Star Wars, but Thor Love and Thunder, let's make some predictions. I'm going to see it in a few days. I anticipate that it'll probably be funny as hell, but perhaps too funny to satisfy the Marvel fans who are going to want some like more action, more spectacle, something with some more stakes. But I think Russell Crowe is going to be sublime as Zeus. Taika Waititi adores Russell Crowe. He's obsessed with Russell Crowe. In that video I mentioned earlier about him visiting that DVD store, he's like caressing all the movies like Gladiator and Master and Commander in which he's appeared. And at one point he even says something like, Russell, 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 I love you.
Russell, 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 I love you.
So I think he will do a great job with that. And I love the fact that like the movie's including Thor's chariot drawn by those 2 goats. Like, Taika Waititi is really good about bringing in really specific mythological ingredients into his movies.
Look at those! They are wonderful.
Yes, they are. They also scream quite a lot.
And I'm fired up as hell to see Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy on the screen at the same time doing their thing. In terms of box office, I don't think it'll be as big as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but I do think it'll be way bigger than some of the other Marvel movies in recent years that have kind of underperformed. And you could say that's due to the pandemic or due to creative reasons. In terms of box office, let's say I think it's going to come in right around the exact same number as Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok ended up grossing $854 million worldwide. So if Love and Thunder replicates that success, it would come right under Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in terms of box office success. And Next Goal Wins? Who the hell knows? I just hope it'll be good, but I imagine it will do 1/20th of the box office of Thor Love and Thunder, because obviously it's not a giant franchise movie, but I imagine it'll be much more personal for Taika Waititi and probably, hopefully, maybe the stronger movie. At any rate, I've talked enough at this point. I can feel myself going hoarse. But before I go, I need to give a shout out to the sponsor of my podcast, Manscaped. Manscaped is the world's foremost expert in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their tools are precision engineered to look after your family jewels so the next time you get buck-ass naked, you're looking good, you're looking your best, and so their products get my highest possible recommendation. Go to manscaped.com, look at the Performance Package 4.0, and use the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps. That'll get you 20% off of any purchase. But I can't thank you enough for watching my video. I really appreciate it. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, all that good stuff. And you can hunt me down on Twitter at Geeking Out if you want to talk more about Taika Waititi's career. But thanks again for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.